A lot of us find it difficult to say no, even to the little things that, if we would take a moment to think about, have no importance for us in the near or distant future. As for those of us who get that nasty label, people pleasers, this becomes an even more complicated issue. The question that we should ask ourselves is, aren't we all overlooking the amount of time and energy that we invest into saying yes to nearly everything? Shouldn't we take a moment and reflect on the advantages that are given by a negative answer instead? Let me share with you something about myself. I consider myself a positive person, concerned with my friends' well-being. I like to give my support where it's needed and when it's possible and when it feels right for me to do so. I'm not a people pleaser per se, but my background, meaning my family and my childhood experiences, have taught me to be nice to people. I remember that as a teenager, for me, being nice to my friends involved saying yes to basically anything they asked of me. For a period of time, when I had nothing to do but kill time, this was no problem. I didn't take time to think it over or consider if what I was doing for and with them didn't conflict too much with what I wanted to do for myself. If I could help with something, I just do it. In principle, I'm roughly the same person right now. I'm caring and extremely attached to the people that matter the most in my life, but I'm also changed compared to back then when I wasn't compelled to think about the importance of managing time, an important lesson that still has to be learned, and it had to be learned. As I grew up and matters of life took more and more of my time, my first job, my first girlfriend, my family, relying more on me than when I was young, I came to feel, and the heavy weight was pressing down on my shoulders. I felt that, and we call this pressure responsibilities. And I hated the word. Why should I be responsible? I was just thinking to myself, I'm just a teenager, but I have nothing to do but dream about my future. The dreaming time, however, was over for me, and soon I found out myself craving desperately for every free hour that I could have. A couple of years later, I was rethinking my whole strategy. Whenever people were asking me if I could do this or that, I would check back with them and I would check with myself if I didn't have the time and energy to invest in what I had been proposed to me and respond accordingly. Some may argue that I've become more selfish, but isn't the whole concept of selfishness a bit misunderstood? Welcome to the first lecture. From a psychological point of view, being selfish is something that comes naturally to us human beings. In other words, every action that we make, every decision that we take, is deeply rooted into self-interest. Psychology also tells us that one's actions must always be triggered by self-interest. So, in theory, all of our motives are selfish. Quote, "If people sometimes act for others, it is only because they think that it is in their own best interest to do so." End quote. David McKinnon, a psychology professor from the Arizona State University, said in one of his books. I went on to dig deeper into this matter because it felt like an oversimplified theory. My research was not in vain because I found this. James Rachels, author of the book called Egoism and Moral Skepticism, argues that people can be, and are in fact, genuinely altruistic. He turns things around by saying that getting satisfaction from helping others is not selfish at all, but instead the exact opposite of being selfish. But how can that be? Isn't drawing satisfaction from doing something for others a selfish act in itself? Apparently it is not, and here's how Rachels explains it. He understood that psychological egoism is regarded as follows, quote, "All men are selfish in everything that they do. That is, that the only motive from which anyone ever acts is self-interest," unquote. On the same page, ethical egoism is commonly seen as follows, quote, "Regardless of how men do in fact behave, they have no obligation to do anything except what is in their own interests," end quote. Then he comes up with a hypothetical example where Mr. Smith chooses to help a friend with his studies, rather than going on a trip to the countryside. Saying that Mr. Smith chose this because he wanted to be helpful more than he wanted to be somewhere else is a bad argument. Why? Because it sits on the presumption that people only do what they want to do. This couldn't be farther from the truth. There are, in fact, two classes of actions. One where we don't really want to do something, but we do it anyway. And the second, we do things because we feel obligated. As far as Mr. Smith is concerned, he only helped his friend because he felt compelled to do so. Quote, If Smith wants to do something that will help his friend, even when it means foregoing his own enjoyments, that is precisely what makes him unselfish. What else could unselfishness be, if not for wanting to help others? It is the object of a want that determines whether it is selfish or not, unquote. With this in mind, the only logical conclusion is that when you say yes to something, you do it because you want to say yes. On the other hand, when it comes to saying no, because you take the time to realize that that act would be beneficial to the other party, but detrimental to your own happiness, then it would be completely absurd to call this act selfish. It's a matter of choice, after all. Welcome to the second lecture. Let me explain to you the common reasons why you can't say no. 1. The pleasing factor. Firstly, we have a desire to please people, because when they're thankful and happy that we've helped, we also gain an ego boost, and we start to feel more appreciated. It's something common, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it. But instead of being selfish like that, why not use our logic and put on the scale the advantages and disadvantages to see which weighs more? In other words, instead of making choices based on insecurities and the need of approval from others, consider the alternative. That is, to give more power to our yes by simply saying no. Speaking of power, think of it this way. The more you say yes to things that aren't really important to you, the less power and authority it will have in the future. So get that power back by learning how to say no and how to discern between a deliberate choice and an automated answer. 2. The hurt factor. Why do we say yes even when we know right from the start that we're saying it to something that is not beneficial to us? It's because we're afraid of hurting people with our negative answer. Let's say you have a big exam coming next week and you know that every hour counts. Yet, one of your best friends has just broken up with his girlfriend. He asks you to come over to offer your support. So, do you say yes right away? Even though it's a half-hearted yes? Because you're worried that you'd hurt him even more with a negative answer? Or do you have time to explain that you'd love to help, but simply can't at the moment? If you're choosing your friend over the exam, you'll both end up frustrated. Do you know why? Because you won't have enough time to study and eventually will fail the exam. Then your best friend will start to feel guilty about it while you secretly blame him for your failure, and maybe less secretly admit and take pride in that you simply cannot hold back when someone needs you. However, the idea here is that no one is happy in this scenario. 3. Avoiding conflict. Another reason for which we tend to say yes inadvertently is because most of us have a natural tendency to avoid conflict. When you say no, you automatically think that the person will be angry with you, thus leading to an unwanted conflict. Furthermore, even if there is no foreseeable conflict, you still consider that by saying no, you would create a disagreement between yourself and that person, which will eventually lead to negative consequences. The solution is to discuss the reasons of your refusal and reach a common ground. If that person is still reluctant to take a no for an answer, just move on and let things cool off for a while. You can come back when the waters are still and appeal to his or her logic. Welcome to our third lecture. An article posted on Psychology Today says, quote, "According to North Carolina researchers, you overcommit because you expect to have more time in the future than you do in the present. But then tomorrow becomes today, and yesterday's yes becomes today's damn, and you find yourself making excuses," end quote. It's only natural that when you say yes to a whole bunch of projects, thinking that you have time to fulfill all those promises, whether they're made to yourself or to others, you'll end up with an overcrowded agenda and actually realize that you can't possibly have the time to do it all. It's a mistake that we've all made. As a matter of fact, another study conducted by Gal Zaberman, PhD, and John Lynch Jr. reveals that, quote, "We are more prone to mistakenly expect a future surplus of time than we are to expect a future surplus of money, which seem to be much more accurate in our money forecasting," end quote. Because we know for sure that a day has 24 hours and not a minute more or less, we mistakenly believe on a subconscious level that every day is the same, when in fact it isn't. The two scientists point out that the very nature of time tricks us. We have this tendency of dismissing from our minds the fact that every little thing we choose to say yes to is going to stack up and fill up the day. We need to filter out the unnecessary in order to gain more time for what's really important. Gall and Lynch also draw a clear line between time and money by saying, quote, "Compared with demands on one's time, money needs in the future are relatively predictable from money needs today," end quote. What does this mean? It's our inclination to be subjects of a phenomenon called delay discounting. In layman's terms, we are happy to get a lower reward right now than wait a little longer and get the big pot. Quote, "People often make commitments long in advance that they would never make if the same commitments required immediate action," unquote. Gall and Lynch point out. That is, they discount future time investments relatively steeply. Against the clock, but pro-career? When it comes to our professional life, it's equally important to be able to manage your time because, after all, your entire future is at stake. You have the difficult task to learn how to say no, not just to your colleagues, but also to your boss. You shouldn't take on tasks that are too specified by your job description, even if saying no to your boss seems scary. He won't be able to fire you because he asked you to do something that you're not supposed to do. If the case is that your boss is giving you more projects that you can handle, the tasks are falling under your job description, reason with him. Tell him that by taking too many commitments, your productivity will be negatively influenced. Ask him to prioritize your projects accordingly so that you can work on them efficiently and not under pressure. It's a known fact that today's companies expect more and more work to be done by their employees in less and less time. So people tend to give in and take this fact as a natural course of things when, in fact, they should put their foot down and say no. You would be inclined to believe that when it comes to one's career, it's fear that keeps the individual from saying no to requests that are not beneficial to him and to the business altogether, when in fact you'd be wrong. Fear is the last thing on their minds when we say yes. We say yes because we want to be regarded as a team player and a nice person. The hard truth is that no one cares about that. People appreciate a person that has a strong will and a mind of their own, rather than someone who says yes to everything. They will perceive that person as being weak, and they'll use that to their advantage. Quote, "People need to change their mindset about agreeing to everything," end quote. Susan Newman, PhD in social psychology and author of the book of No. By saying no, you can focus on your goals, she continued. Welcome to our fourth lecture. While we encourage you to say no, we also advise you to think twice before you do it. When one or more projects are presented to you, consider the consequences of a negative answer. Let us explain what we mean by that. You've probably noticed that people tend to accept a lot of projects, especially at the beginning of their career. This implies saying yes to a lot of tasks. It's only natural, right? Because they need to prove to the management that they're worthy of a higher position. This is a good thing. It's going to help them climb the ladder, but once they've got there, they can also afford to say no much more often. Quote, "When most people climb a career ladder, they typically start out by agreeing to most things they're asked to do that vaguely relate to the job description," end quote. Nanette Gartrell, MD, psychiatrist and author of My Answer is No, If That's Okay With You. She goes on to explain, quote, "But after time, the more successful you are, the more you're asked to do, and the more you need to say no," end quote. So you're not under the thumb of your boss anymore, but you still have colleagues, right? It's always better to keep a good relationship with them, but that doesn't mean you should let them abuse your kindness. When they come for you for help, but you know that you've already fully booked with other projects of your own, don't be rude and rush them out the door. Instead, try a different approach. Say something like, "I'd love to help you right now, but look at this pile of papers on my desk," or, "Hey, I'd be glad to help you as soon as I can, as soon as I finish the project. How much time do you have until you're able to be ready with yours?" Or you could say something like this, "I can't help you with this right now, but I'll be happy to aid you in some other way." Furthermore, whenever you turn down a project that you know could help another colleague climb to a higher position, don't be afraid to recommend him or her for the position after saying no. You'll not only have that colleague's appreciation, but also the advantage of refusing a task with an alternative and immediate solution. Quote, always try to offer something when you're turning someone down. Gartrell proves my point. Often we are tempted to justify our own weakness in saying yes by placing blame on external factors. These external factors often are the people we interact with. You might notice this tendency in yourself. Observe it. Don't jump to the other extreme by starting to punish yourself mentally. Instead, focus on increasing your awareness and be present in the moment every time you see yourself reacting or responding emotionally and intensely, but lacking the vision of the whole picture and your solid reason for response. We become so used to reacting without thinking things through and filtering them that, at some point, we turn into these reactionary robots who most of the time make use of their nose in a totally destructive and combative way. This mechanism that perpetuates conflict and uses negation out of fear automatically as a defense device ends up shaping our entire life and reality. We don't trust ourselves, so we start doubting everyone else. We reinstate ourselves by using no and hide the fear of facing our own insecurities and guilt behind our anger. It becomes a vicious circle. Being aware or being wise means breaking out of this circle. There is no other conflict with an external individual, only the struggle to understand our own depth and causes for projecting an external enemy. When that understanding occurs, we change our attitude, both toward ourselves and toward the others. In The Power of a Positive No, author William Ury uses an old Japanese story to emphasize this exact aspect of self-realization. One day, the samurai went to collect a debt from the fisherman. "I'm sorry," the fisherman said, "but this last year has been a very bad one for me, and I regret to say that I do not have the money to repay you." Quick to anger, the samurai drew his sword and prepared to kill the fisherman on the spot. Thinking fast, the fisherman boldly said, "I have been studying martial arts, and my master teaches that you should never strike out of anger." The samurai looked at him for a minute, then slowly lowered his sword. "Your master is wise," he said quietly. "My master used to teach the same lesson. Sometimes my anger gets the better of me. I will give you 1 more year to repay your debt, but if you fail by even a penny, I will surely kill you." The samurai returned to his house, arriving late at night. He crept in quietly, not wishing to wake his wife, but to his shock, he found 2 people in the bed, his wife and a stranger dressed in samurai clothing. With a surge of jealousy and anger, he raised his sword to slay them both, but suddenly the fisherman's words came back to him. "Do not strike out of anger." The samurai stopped for a moment, took a deep breath, and then deliberately made a loud noise. His wife instantly woke up, as did the stranger, who turned out to be his mother. "What is the meaning of this?" he yelled. "I almost killed you both." "We were afraid of robbers," his wife explained, "so I dressed your mother up in your samurai clothes to scare them off." A year passed, and the fisherman came to see the samurai. "I had an excellent year, so here's your money back with interest," the fisherman said happily to him. "Keep your money," replied the samurai. "You repaid your debt long ago." Welcome to our 5th lecture. Being a nice person has nothing to do with having to agree with everything that people say or ask of you. It's only in our current cultural notion that nice is used to describe a pleasant person, someone who is considerate and agreeable. I'm not sure when it exactly happened, but the meaning of the word nice has dramatically changed. The first definition of nice, according to the English dictionary, explains that someone nice is a person that is hard to please, a person who has high standards, who is careful and rigorous. In their book called The Nice Factor, Joe Ellen Gersp and Robin Chandler consider that people often use the word nice when they have nothing else to say. As such, expressions such as, "Oh, what a nice thing to do," or "what a nice person he is," or "you did nice," are stripped of any deeper meaning and tend to project a false feeling of happiness and accomplishment. For the authors, the word nice, quote, "is the end of the spectrum of possible behavior where people are ineffective, invisible, adaptive, and powerless," end quote. They continue to explain that there's nothing wrong with being nice in common cultural terms, but that by being too nice, you're leaving room for abuse and ridicule. Their book offers some great examples of what too nice means and where it can lead us. Now pay attention. It all starts with the assumption that, without exception, all of us are doing things that we don't really like. It is in our social gene to do that. It's our key to surviving the concrete jungle. At work, we say yes to unpaid hours because we'd rather finish something than spend time with friends. On a major holiday, we go to gatherings that aren't really to our liking, just to fit in. Quote, "None of these is really a great hardship, and although you might feel put out because you'd rather be doing something else or don't want to be bothered, they are minor sacrifices for the greater good of your job, your marriage, your family relations, your friendships," Joe and Robin explain. However, the authors continue with raising the alarm. They say that at the time when these small sacrifices become the norm and are no longer the exception, your reservoir of too nice will rapidly go dry. Once that happens, you start undermining your own self-esteem, becoming frustrated and filled with resentment. Furthermore, just like we've said before, people dislike, or choose simply not to care at all, individuals that are too nice. They quickly become frustrated by their passivity when it comes to decision making. They feel insecure around them. I'm pretty sure that you've all had or still have that friend who always answers, "Yeah, sure, yeah, whatever you want," or "It's fine with me, either way." How annoying is that? I'm telling you, it feels like you just want to start shaking that person really hard so that he or she finally wakes up and takes the driver's seat in his or her own car. Welcome to our sixth lecture. It could be challenging to accurately determine whether you're just nice or too nice to deal with. Why is it important to know? Well, because being too nice is not something that can't be changed, but as we've seen, it's something that can do a lot of damage. You have a chance to evaluate your behavior and pinpoint the faults that make you and others feel uncomfortable. The NICE factor offers a comprehensive list of questions that can help you establish if you have an adequate stand towards saying yes or no, and to know if you're too nice. I'm only going to paraphrase some of the most important ones. Rate your answer as such: 1 for never, 2 for occasionally, 3 for often, and 4 for always. Are you apologizing even when it's not necessary? Avoiding conflict at any cost? Looking for appreciation from everyone even though you don't appreciate them back? Consumed with what people think of you, regardless if you know them or not? Saying sorry for other people's mistakes? Feeling like you need to lift people's spirits up when they're down? Letting people go with doing you harm without telling them a thing? Saying yes because you presume this is what's expected of you? Avoiding asking for favors? Mixing your personal agenda with goals or projects that don't belong to you? Answering with, "Whatever you do is fine with me," to questions such as, "What do you want to do?" Looking for approval whenever you come up with a suggestion or a solution? Agreeing with things even though you really don't? Always choosing the easy way out because it's better than struggling for something better? Please write all these questions down and answer them. I'm going to summarize the evaluation according to the answers you've given. Not too shabby. If your answers are mostly comprised of 1s and 2s, then your judgment is pretty solid. You have the will and determination to make decisions that are in your favor, even though at times you're making half-hearted decisions by saying yes. You know that that's not something that defines you, as you compensate with saying no to those really key moments. In between. If you answered with 2s and 3s to most of the above questions, then you should become aware of the fact that there are some areas that need improving. While being too nice doesn't fit you completely, you should realize that you're not in complete control of your decisions. At times, you may even feel like you're in contradiction, in the sense that there are moments when you're ready to say a strong and determined no and put up a fight for what you believe in, And there are times when you cower and leave all that power of a well-thought no behind you. This does nothing but to make you even more confused, because you know both the sweet taste of victory and the bitterness of an unspoken defeat. The problem. Last but not least, if you answered most of these questions with 3s and 4s, then you're going to have to face all of those problems. I know it sounds serious, but a wake-up call is in order. No more niceties. You compromise more than you should, and by doing so, you're letting yourself and others down. You're way too preoccupied with not offending others that you've forgotten to have an opinion yourself. If you continue to walk this path, you will diminish to a point of no return your ability to make a change in your life. You'll become that sailing ship without a captain, drifting at the mercy of the sea. So, take a stand now. Having reached the end of this chapter, we want to go over the most important aspects of saying no. Life is mostly made of decisions, whether we like it or not. To put it simply, it all starts with a yes or a no. But when our lives are full of yes and too few no's, then what? Then your yes becomes obsolete. It bears no meaning. It has no weight. It's a mumbled yes that people hate. Consider being selfish every now and then, even if that means driving some of your friends away. After all, if they're not able to take no for an answer, they're not really friends. We know how important it is to be liked, to make people happy, but be careful how far you're taking it. Stop worrying about hurting others with a negative answer. Try to reach a common ground. Explain the reasons for which you can't do what they ask. Conflict is not always a bad thing. Many good things have happened following a conflict, like philosophy. Consider that every little thing that you agree to do is eating up time and energy, and both of them should be most precious to you. When it comes to your career, people in managing positions and coworkers appreciate more an employee that's able to say no. It shows that you have something to say, that you're capable of making your own decisions and not just following the ones handed to you. Even more important, keep in mind that saying no, just like saying yes, has a lot of ramifications. Don't decline projects or requests based on a whim. Use your filter to know for sure whether this is beneficial to you and or to the business. When you turn down colleagues, be sure to use adequate language to let them know that you'd like to help them, but can't at the moment. Assess your niceness and stay away from being taken for a fool. Say no. In wrapping up this chapter, I will leave you with Dr. Susan Gregg's words, which I urge you to return to whenever you're not feeling strong enough to say the N-word. Quote, "No is a complete sentence, and so often we forget that. When we don't want to do something, we can simply smile and say no. We don't have to explain ourselves. We can just say no." Early on in my journey, I found developing the ability to say no expanded my ability to say yes and really mean it. My early attempts at saying no were often far from graceful, but with practice, even my no came from a place of love. Love yourself enough to be able to say yes or no. The whole saying no issues can give rise to powerful inner conflicts that can become a hard-to-bear burden. The same issues, however, can be seen as a chance to heal and evolve. No matter how much you read about tips and strategies to help you gain more confidence in this area, it's hardly useful if you don't truly acknowledge and understand your right to set boundaries. Be your own master and take good care of yourself as you best see fit. Starting from early childhood, we are molded by social pressure and develop different types of coping mechanisms that ultimately secure our life and identity as adults. Unfortunately, neither our parents nor our teachers are aware of the long-term damage sometimes created when they, with all the good intentions nonetheless, force politeness and niceness onto us at inappropriate moments, overlooking many important aspects of a situation or event. So it's no surprise later on that we become so vulnerable and feel bombarded with demands from friends, colleagues, institutions, employers, and family. However, even if you see the negative impact these needs and demands have on you, do not simply create opposition in your life. Try to incorporate them in your self-development process. They can be your best teachers. They're opportunities in disguise, as I've pointed out many times in my works. Make your yes really matter by learning to say no. You must respect your commitment to your no's just as you must respect and keep your promises. This way, you will also help others learn to respect your decisions. If you say, I only have 10 minutes to spare, or I can talk, but only for 10 minutes, and half an hour later you're still engaged in that conversation, you are sabotaging yourself. You're giving up your power. Having the wisdom and confidence to say no without feeling guilty, but also with much care and consideration for the other's feelings, will put you in control of your own life and help you stay focused and committed to your goals. For me, it was perhaps one of the most difficult lessons I had to learn, but it was also worth it. I saved myself so much trouble, drama, and irritation by making use of my no that I can't even begin to describe. This simple word can be indeed painful, but it can also be liberating. Next time, when you find it hard to say no, but you know it's the best thing for you to do, imagine that you are saying no to your low self-esteem, to your anguish and to your self-doubt, to anxiety, to your regrets. Stop saying yes to anything that diminishes your power to grow, to anything that may affect you negatively in any way. Start saying no to norms and standards that do not represent you, to burdens that are not yours to carry, to people who limit your freedom of expression and your ideals, to a lifestyle that doesn't bring you happiness and joy. Find yourself a model, a hero to inspire you, someone who's perfectly assumed and uttered no echoes in your own heart. At first, emulate this model until you feel comfortable to say your own no's and stand your ground. Now that you've completed this course, let yourself start a new relationship with yourself, guided by the determination to manifest a life of affirmation that can easily and paradoxically kick off with a simple negation. Tap into the power behind saying no without feeling guilty, selfish, or mean. All those around you can benefit more from you being a strong-willed person than being consumed with doubts and the urge to please. A strong-willed individual is built by his or her no's just as much as he or she is built by his or her yeses. People who get easily offended and disappointed by your refusal and expect you to agree every time they come up with a request or a proposal are not very concerned with your well-being, believe me. Hold on to your right to say no without having to explain yourself. It will give you peace of mind and confidence in making your decisions.